So I thought today we would talk a bit about cholesterol, and I've titled my discussion of it, The Blessing of Heart-Healthy Cholesterol. And which might seem like an interesting title given the fact that most people are looking for ways of getting their cholesterol down, but I'm talking about benefits of cholesterol to a certain extent. That's where I'll head with this. I'll tell you about a gentleman who approached me. He was one of these people that likes to bait you, give you a hard question and then see what you do with it. And he says, why me? I had a heart attack with a cholesterol of 140. He said the doctors always said they wish they had a low cholesterol. And he was the envy of some of his caretakers, but he ended up with a heart attack in the hospital, laying on his back and having somebody asking him if he wanted a bypass surgery. And it puzzled him terribly. How could you have a low cholesterol and end up with a heart attack? Well, I want to help show why that could happen here as we go along, and I'll get back to that. But let me just say, with natural cholesterol control, that is through good food, pure water, and vigorous exercise, you can enjoy clear thinking, emotional well-being, have a strong immune system, have good balanced hormones, and you'll preserve your physical and mental energy. And those are sort of the things we're looking at here. Now, just to give you a little more background on myself, I specialize in what we've come to call lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine maximizes your health above the probability of disease. So I've spent the last 15 years researching lifestyle medicine and teaching people how to preserve their health, how to have the right cholesterol, and how to avoid lifestyle diseases. So, overview of where I'm headed with this discussion. We'll talk about the benefits of healthy cholesterol. We'll talk about the effects of too much and too little cholesterol. And we'll also talk about bad cholesterol and the effect of cholesterol on your mind, what you want for a good, healthy mind. So first of all, let's discuss the benefits of healthy cholesterol. I mean, if you didn't have good cholesterol, you'd fall short on brain development, which is something that's very important, especially when you're younger, but also as you're trying to achieve things later in life. A good cholesterol will give you physical and mental energy, help you feel good. It's also important for the cell walls. It's a very important part of making the cells supple and resilient to attack. If you are low on cholesterol, you have trouble making good blood. And so you want good cholesterol for good blood. Now there's another factor of cholesterol that many don't realize, and that is it's very important for the digestion of fats that you eat. It's also important for your immune system. If you're low in cholesterol, you might have trouble fighting off a pandemic or a virus or some other infectious disease. And cholesterol is the building block for hormones. Hormones, estrogens and so forth like that, as well as hormones that are related to your endocrine system. And then, speaking of hormones, it's also important for fertility. So you do need cholesterol, and you need good healthy cholesterol. And by saying healthy cholesterol, I'm sort of inferring that there's unhealthy cholesterol. So I guess the question is, what does healthy cholesterol look like? Or unhealthy cholesterol? Well, to illustrate, I'll tell you about my uncle. He died at age 39 of a heart attack. And that's sort of a young age to die of a heart attack. In fact, he was just on his career. He was an anesthesiologist at the University of Texas, teaching other anesthesiologists. And he left behind his wife and 2 teenage sons, my aunt and cousins. And so I'd like to ask a question that I'll just sort of leave out there. What do you think he ate every night for supper? Now, I've asked a lot of people that question in audiences, and I get answers like, well, he probably had a hamburger, or he had, French fries, or he had, maybe he had cheese, or maybe he had, and those are all probably things that would do this to him too, but interestingly enough, his nightly supper was ice cream. And you wonder, well, what's so bad about ice cream? Well, ice cream has a number of problems to it. I remember hearing somebody say tongue-in-cheek that don't feed ice cream to your dog, it will kill it. Eat it yourself. Well, so much for joking. But yeah, it's not very good. And here's what the problem is. When you have ice cream, you have a custard mix, a mixture of sugar and milk products with cholesterol in it. They whip it full of air, they freeze it suddenly, and they've trapped air or oxygen next to the cholesterol. The oxygen oxidizes the cholesterol, and you end up with oxidized cholesterol. I had one gentleman trying to figure out how many trillion molecules of oxidized cholesterol would be in a half gallon of ice cream, and it was quite phenomenal. But here's the thing, when you eat that, those oxidized cholesterol molecules go to the cells lining your blood vessels. Within 24 hours of eating this, laboratory animals show lesions in their blood vessels. Within 24 hours of eating ice cream, if you please. And so this is a real problem. Now, interestingly enough, the mixture of milk and sugar causes a elevation in cholesterol that lasts much longer than if you ate just the milk by itself, and that high cholesterol lasts for 24 hours. And so you want to be sure that you aren't loading up on milk and sugar. Now, there's other things that will give you a high oxidized cholesterol. I mean, pancake mixes have been identified as a problem because they dry the eggs, put it in the mix. All you have to do is add water, but then you end up with oxidized cholesterol in those dried eggs as that package sits on the shelf. The longer it sits on the shelf, the longer the oxygen is next to the cholesterol, the higher the oxidized cholesterol levels go, and the more likely you are to get lesions in your blood vessels of your heart, your brain, your kidneys, wherever. Now, cheese is a challenge. I mean, is cheese fresh? No. Is it high in fat? Yes. And so you end up with oxidized cholesterol. And this is a huge problem for heart disease. I mean, any animal fat's going to be a problem. It's going to have cholesterol in it. And it's very hard to get cholesterol from an animal into your body without it coming in contact with oxygen. And when it comes in contact with oxygen, then you have this oxidized cholesterol problem. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, you can make your own oxidized cholesterol at home. Take any product that has cholesterol in it, take it out, put it on your grill. Put it in a frying pan, heat it up. Just expose it to oxygen, and you end up with large amounts of oxidized cholesterol. Now, when you eat oxidized cholesterol, it increases inflammation everywhere in your body. In your lungs, you get more asthma. In your liver, so you get more non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. For men, the prostate, you end up with more prostate inflammation, hypertrophy, cancer. I mean, it goes to the joints, and you end up with more arthritis, especially autoimmune arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis. It goes to the skin. And you may realize that if you sit out in the sun, the cholesterol in your skin is sent on its way to vitamin D. But if that cholesterol in your skin is oxidized, it sits there in your skin and it causes changes in the cells of your skin, leading to skin cancer. Biggest cause of skin cancer is oxidized cholesterol, not the sun. And interestingly enough, if you had skin cancer, such as melanoma, and you get more sun, you survive better than if you get less sun. Now, that said, back to cholesterol. Oxidized cholesterol goes to your colon, you get colon cancer, goes to breast, leading to more breast disease and breast cancer, and it also goes to your bones. And when the oxidized cholesterol goes to your bones, increasing inflammation, you get more osteoporosis, thinning of the bones. Now, what do I do about this oxidized cholesterol? Well, first step, of course, is prevention. Primary prevention is avoiding the sources of oxidized cholesterol in your diet. But the other important thing is being up on your antioxidants. In fact, two people with the same cholesterol level, let's say two people had a cholesterol level of 190, which might be a little higher than what we would think of as optimum. If they both have a cholesterol 190 and one eats all the time at the fast food joints, cheese and meat and so forth, and the other one eats lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, the one who goes to the fast food joints will be the one to get a heart attack. The one who eats the fresh fruits and vegetables will not be the one to get or die of a heart attack. So it makes a difference. And thinking of foods that are high in antioxidants that have been shown in the studies, this is all evidence-based. You can go to my website and download the handout for this discussion under handouts, presentation handouts. But antioxidant foods that have been studied, one is grapefruit. But you might be thinking, now wait a minute, my doctor told me when I started taking my cholesterol-lowering pill I couldn't eat grapefruit. Well, there's some competition here, isn't there? And interesting that something that's very good at lowering your cholesterol is in competition with the doctor's supposed good thing at lowering cholesterol. But yeah, grapefruit is good. Apples and onions because of their quercetin, which is a phytochemical. Carrots, leafy greens, lettuce and leaf lettuce are good. Beet greens, garlic, both raw or boiled, has been shown to lower cholesterol. Pistachio nuts and wild rice, black-eyed peas, potatoes with the skins. You know, a lot of the nutrients is in the skins of vegetables and fruits. And then seaweed's been studied and shown to lower cholesterol. Those are just a few of the studies I found. I'm sure there's other things that you would find that would be lowering cholesterol, and we'll talk about more of those as we go along here. But let's talk about the quantities, too much or too little of a good thing. And you know, cholesterol is often described in terms of LDL or HDL or total cholesterol. What do those all mean? Well, it all starts in the liver. Your liver is the source of your cholesterol. It either produces some if you need it in good quantities, or it will process the cholesterol as you eat. And then once it has the cholesterol all processed and ready for the body, it needs to be delivered to the body to make those hormones or good cell walls and so forth that we discussed earlier. And so the delivery truck that carries the cholesterol from the liver to where it's needed is called LDL, low density lipoprotein. And then once the cholesterol is through doing what it needs to do out in the body, for your brain, for your cell walls, for your hormones and so forth, then as it might get oxidized or lose its potency, it needs to be returned to the liver for processing or being recycled or discarded. And the delivery truck or the sanitation truck that goes out and picks it up is called HDL, high density lipoprotein. And it sort of reminds me of New York City when they had a strike of the sanitation engineers, the garbage truck drivers. The trash was piling up and the news was out there, and well, you see, one family figured out how to get rid of their trash. They put their trash into a big box, wrapped it with pretty wrapping paper, put it in the back seat of the car, and left the window down. When Dad went to work, somebody stole their trash every day. Well, to illustrate, you need a lot of trash trucks running if you're going to have a lot of delivery trucks running. So if you have a lot of LDL, you need a lot of HDL. So we talk about the ratio between those two. And so a good high HDL, at least a healthy HDL, will be beneficial in taking old cholesterol out of the system. Now, total cholesterol is usually figured in most laboratories as HDL plus LDL plus 1/3 of triglycerides. So you can see triglycerides play a role in heart disease as well as HDL and LDL. And I'll get back to that here. So too little cholesterol, if you don't have enough, you're going to come short in all those things we mentioned earlier, like brain development, physical and mental energy, cell wall resilience, and so forth. But what about when you have too much? Well, the things it takes to make your cholesterol too high are a big part of the problem because it's usually oxidized cholesterol. But as your cholesterol goes over 150, your risk of a fatal heart attack goes up precipitously. And a lot of doctors looked at this, especially from the Framingham Heart Study, and felt it very important to get your cholesterol down. Now, for us, the big disagreement might be on how to get it down. But getting it down is very important. For example, if your cholesterol goes over 240, your risk of death from a heart attack goes up by 250%. Also, your risk of macular degeneration goes up by 80%. So don't just think this is limited to your heart. You might be having trouble with your eyes, and it can be from cholesterol, especially oxidized cholesterol. It raises your blood pressure by 90%. Dietary cholesterol seriously impairs mental performance. In fact, thinking of mental performance, high levels of cholesterol and oxidized fats or lipids in your system increases your risk of Alzheimer's disease. Does everybody remember what Alzheimer's disease was? Yeah, right. That disease where you forget, huh? So, why do we get high cholesterol? Let's move on from problems with high cholesterol to why does it go up? Well, remember I said one of the reasons you have cholesterol in your body, not only for your brain and hormones, is for digesting fats. And in fact, the largest quantity of cholesterol in your body is used for digesting fats. If you think of the fats in your body as something like, fats that you would try to wash off a dish in your dishwater after eating, you can think of the soap as being like cholesterol soap, and the thing you have to wash off is going to be the thing that the cholesterol soap is going to work on. So if you ate butter and you left a pat of butter on your dish and you're going to try to just wash it off with water and soap, it's going to take an awful lot of soap. And so saturated fats take a lot more soap than, say, unsaturated fats, and so saturated fats will send your cholesterol higher. And this is a serious challenge. People don't realize trans fats are really sort of like saturated fats. They're usually thick at room temperature, and they'll send your cholesterol really high. Anything that's a high-fat diet. And this makes a difference. See, here's the way it works. In your body, when you eat something that's high in fat, and it comes to your stomach tests the food. And it tells the liver, hey, this one's high in fat. The liver then pumps out the soap, which is cholesterol soap, bile acids, and so forth. And that soap then goes into the small intestine. And the small intestine, this soap mixes with the food you ate and emulsifies the fats, extracts them out of the food, and those fats together with the cholesterol soap are reabsorbed somewhere along the small intestine, depending on the fats and depending on the soap. And so this is the process. And then when it's reabsorbed, it comes back to the liver along the soap, the cholesterol soap, and the fats, and at the liver it's reprocessed. So the more fat you eat, the more cholesterol soap it takes. The more cholesterol soap ends up going through the circulation back to the liver, the more soap in the bloodstream, or I'm calling it soap, the cholesterol. And so the more fat you eat, the higher your cholesterol goes. I mean, it's very predictable. For each 5% that you increase the fat in your diet, your cholesterol is going to go up by 1.5 points. A diet high in saturated fat, such as animal fat or hydrogenated fats or coconut oil, can raise your LDL cholesterol by 60%. Butter, 40 grams of butter per day raises your cholesterol by 20 points. It's very predictable, and you can pretty much count on it. So that said, some programs designed to lower your cholesterol will try to capitalize on the fact that liquid fats are more easily digested than solid fats. So they'll switch you from a saturated fat diet to a non-saturated fat diet, such as monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. And yes, this will lower your cholesterol. But look at it this way. If you weren't used to eating any fats, at least processed fats, and you started adding olive oil or some of these other oils, they would actually make your cholesterol go up, just not as much as would saturated fat. So be aware of that. They might be helpful for a change from saturated to unsaturated, but they won't necessarily solve the problem completely. And to further illustrate, one study looked at the difference between using refined oils and eating oils that are occurring naturally in whole foods. In other words, oils from bottles versus oils as found in nuts and seeds and olives and so forth. And so in their study, they looked at where the fats were resorbed as well and how much. And it's interesting to note that if you eat something that's high in added fat, say you get yourself, well, let's just use an example, a bran muffin from the convenience store. But if you look at the ingredients, it's got lots of, say, canola oil or soybean oil or something like that. It's got oils that went through a refining process and then were added to the recipe. If you ate that kind of product, then the oils are absorbed much earlier on in the small intestine with a lot more cholesterol soap, and you end up with a higher cholesterol. On the other hand, when the same people were given foods that were naturally occurring fats, such as the nuts or seeds or olives, then the oils were not absorbed nearly so early on in the small intestine, more toward the end of the small intestine with a lot less cholesterol soap and more phospholipids. And so you end up with a lower cholesterol. Saturated versus unsaturated fat is an interesting thing to look at. They did a study where they compared eating saturated fat, in this case they used cheese, with vegetable oil versus nuts. And so the cheese gave them a very high cholesterol, 251 in this study. But when they switched from cheese to vegetable oil, their cholesterol went down by 23 points, which is good. But then when they switched from cheese to nuts, it went down by 41 points. In other words, they got almost twice as much drop in cholesterol by switching to naturally occurring fats than they got from eating fats that were refined. Did you know that God has something to say about fats? It says in Leviticus 7:23, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Ye shall eat no manner of fat." And then it lists some of them. Back then it was ox or of sheep or goat. Today it might be, margarine or coconut oil or lard or whatever. And so we want to make sure that we understand that God was trying to save them from problems, especially problems of mental inefficiency. Now, looking at different diets, compared to vegetarians, users of animal products eat 50% more fat. So does it come as any surprise that they have 30% higher cholesterols? And of that, 42% higher LDL cholesterol. So the diet definitely makes a difference. Another study looked at a diet high in plant sterols, soy protein, fiber, and almonds, and found they could lower their cholesterol by 28%. Now, how significant is 28%? Well, that's about what you can achieve with a statin drug, 28%. So some might be thinking, well, compared to lifestyle interventions, statin drug therapy offers no cholesterol-lowering advantage, and that is true, except for one. If you take the drug, you can keep going through the golden arches. But as some people have observed, as you go through the golden arches, you might be getting awfully close to the pearly gates. So you don't want to necessarily take that route. And interestingly enough, you use a drug to lower your cholesterol, and most of those drugs, the statin drugs, increase your risk of diabetes like 80%. And there's very few of those drugs that don't give you some other disease. Now let's talk about ways of naturally lowering your cholesterol. One is to eat more fiber. Fiber is very helpful. And you can, for every gram of fiber, you can lower your total cholesterol by anywhere from 1 to 3 points. It's quite effective. And so places to get good fiber, agar gum, psyllium, oat bran, fruit pectin, but those are studied ones. That just sort of suggests you eat what you're going to eat, and then you send a fiber chaser after it. But let me just say that if you just eat food that hasn't been refined, that still has its fiber. Let's take an example, carrots. They're high in fiber, high in antioxidants. They'll reduce your cholesterol, especially its absorption in the bowel, and they'll improve your blood antioxidant levels. So you end up with less heart attacks from the cholesterol you do have. Beans, high in fiber. A couple servings of beans per day will lower your cholesterol and triglycerides by 10%. Now I mentioned sterols or stanols or phytosterols. In naturally occurring oils, there's sometimes some things that are similar to cholesterol but not exactly like cholesterol. They're called sterols. And phyto meaning plant sterols. So phytosterols would be plant sterols. These are much more resistant to any kind of oxidation because plants endure much harsher conditions than human beings do. And so 2 grams per day of plant sterols can lower your cholesterol by 14 points. Well, where would I get my plant sterols? Well, they're highest in nuts and seeds, and then there's beans and grains, and there's still some in fruits and vegetables, but not as much. And so you can find these sources, and if you go to my handout, you'll find this all listed. Now, one study looked at the combined effects of plant sterols, vegetable proteins, and fibers, and found that they could lower their LDL by 29%. And they found that they could reach their maximum reduction in just 2 weeks. In other words, 2 weeks on a good diet, you should see a drop in your cholesterol. And I've had people tell me that they've been their whole life on different drugs, couldn't get their cholesterol down, and when they switched to the good dietary program, as we discuss in our lectures, that you can either watch or read about on our website, that they got lower cholesterol. But why 2 weeks? Well, it's interesting. If you cheat on your diet within that 2 weeks, your cholesterol will never come down. Your body is always watching, and it has the cholesterol there to take care of the, danger of high cholesterol. There's other things that are related to good cholesterol that we as people have good instruction on, and one is a regular schedule. A regular schedule lowers cholesterol. People who eat breakfast regularly have significantly lower cholesterols. On the other hand, people who eat more of their food in the evening have higher cholesterols. It's because your body digests food slower in the evening and has more time, I guess, to pull the cholesterol out of it and put it into your bloodstream. Eating between meals slows digestion and raises your cholesterol. It's good to have a regular schedule for eating and to have at least 5 hours between meals. Interesting, a lot of people eat too much food, and restricting your calorie intake by 25%. And exercising can lower your LDL by 16 points and your triglycerides by 22 points. And so we call it caloric restriction. People live longer when they do that. Now, the big downside to high cholesterol, of course, that we worry about is the heart. And thinking about the heart, there's a big blood vessel in your heart called the left main coronary artery that feeds the majority of your heart muscle. If that coronary artery gets blocked to any amount, it affects blood flow to the heart. But on a EKG or a heart monitor, we can only detect if you're having blockage in the heart blood vessels if it reaches 70%. In other words, if you only had 60% blockage in a heart blood vessel and we hooked you up to the heart monitor, we wouldn't be able to tell a difference. And so I guess you have a lot of reserve in your heart. But your heart blood vessels are feeding the heart. There's blood vessels that feed your brain, especially your frontal lobes. The anterior cerebral artery feeds your frontal lobes. And if it gets blocked just 20%, we begin to see changes on a mental status exam. And so you have a lot less reserve in your brain than you do in your heart. And so you want to be aware that the brain is much more sensitive. And if you have plaque in your heart, you have it in your brain for sure. Well, what do? I'm all plugged up. Spent my life eating garbage food, huh? Well, you can fix it. Some of you heard of Caldwell Esselstyn of the Cleveland Clinic. He's shown on angiography that blockages in coronary arteries can be reversed by changes in diet. You can see angiograms of the hearts before and after he did his program with some patients, and the blood vessels open wide open. Simply changes in diets. He says that the optimal diet consists of grains, legumes, that's beans, vegetables, and fruit, with less than 10 to 15% of the calories coming from fat. Very low fat diet. He goes on to say that this diet minimizes the likelihood of stroke, obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and cancers of the breast, prostate, colon, rectum, uterus, and ovary. So, very good diet, very good effects, very good outcomes. Now, if you're not drinking enough water, the relative amount of cholesterol in your bloodstream is going to go way up. So, good hydration results in lower cholesterol. Most people are dehydrated. They don't drink enough water. Gardeners get more sunshine and fresh air. As a result, the cholesterol in their skin is churned to vitamin D. So you get a benefit. You get rid of the cholesterol and you change it into vitamin D. Athletes have significantly lower cholesterols and triglycerides. And I'm not saying you have to become an athlete, but just exercising 30 minutes a day can decrease your triglycerides by 10 points. It'll also help raise your HDL by 3 points in one study. And if you're looking at boosting your HDL, laughter has been shown to boost your HDL by as much as 23%. So have a laugh about it. And speaking of mental things, you know, one study looked at religious observance and found out that people who regularly, like weekly attendees at religious services, had lower total cholesterols, triglycerides, and higher HDLs. Helping others is a big benefit to yourself. People who volunteer live longer, have better cholesterols. One study was looking at this, said mortality was significantly reduced for individuals who provided support to friends, relatives, neighbors, and their spouse. Receiving support had no effect on mortality. You know, it is more blessed to give than to receive, isn't it? And Volume 4 of the Testimonies, page 56 says, the pleasure of doing good to others imparts a glow to the feelings which flashes through the nerves, quickens the circulation of blood, and induces mental and physical health. How's that for a prescription for getting healthy? Now, let's just spend a little time with the mind-body connection before we close here. People who have higher cholesterols, we said it affects their mental functioning, and this results often in depression, and so people get depressed. On the other hand, if you have a healthy cholesterol, there's less depression, less bipolar, less Alzheimer's, less Parkinson's, better memory, clearer thinking. On the other hand, psychological stress will elevate your cholesterol. And I've had a lot of people come to me doing everything right, but they're all stressed out and they had a high cholesterol. Now, one good way to reduce stress is to go on a good vacation. How about Hawaii? Wouldn't that be nice? Well, you know, the Hawaiian diet, based on their traditional foods, which is high in complex carbohydrate, low in fat, and moderate in protein, has been shown to lower cholesterol by 50 points. So go sit on the beach, eat good food, and lower your cholesterol. Well, that's interesting. Hawaiian diet. You know, sounds a bit like the Eden diet. Lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. You know, the Bible diet, Genesis 1:29 and 3:18, then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, they will be yours for food, and you'll eat the plants of the field. There's a diet that can help people to reduce their cholesterol. And can you imagine? That must be a foretaste of heaven, where we're going to eat only plant-based foods. Well, let's get back to our gentleman I started out with. He says, why me? I had a heart attack at a cholesterol of 140. Well, I followed him around a bit and I discovered the source of his cholesterol. He was eating things like cheese, pizza, and ice cream. You know, if you have a cholesterol of 140, it tells you nothing about the quality of the cholesterol, only the quantity. So he had a low cholesterol, but if we checked his cholesterol, it was probably oxidized. It's sort of like your car. You can take the dipstick and you can check the oil. If you're sitting in the car and you're looking at the dash and looking at the meter or the gauge that tells you what the oil pressure is like, the pressure might be good. But that tells you nothing about the quality of the oil. But if you go out and pull the dipstick and look at it and it's all black, then you know you've got to change your oil. Well, that's the same as true with your cholesterol. If it's 140, that might sound good, but if it's all from pizza and ice cream, you might be in big trouble. So don't be deceived by that fact. So in summary, you need some good, healthy cholesterol. But too much cholesterol hurts your heart, your brain, your eyes, and other things. Oxidized cholesterol creates disease throughout your whole body. Stress raises and oxidizes your cholesterol. On the other hand, a good lifestyle, good diet, and good psychological health habits can help. So, just a few pointers. Go low fat. Avoid the soap producers, cooking oils, animal fats, margarine, butter. Eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains and beans, in preference to refined foods, oxidized foods, and animal protein. Keep a regular schedule, including a good breakfast, even skipping supper. Become more physically active, drink more pure water, and your stress, turn it over to God, and He can take care of it for you because He cares for you.